And the recent resurgence of inflation has set academics and economic practitioners on a mission to decipher its causes and how to navigate these turbulent times that they are facing. With central bankers gathering for critical meetings amidst global uncertainties, the policy debate centers on three main aspects. Number one, the coordination of monetary and fiscal policy. Number two, the effectiveness of asset purchases. And lastly, the flexibility of central banks in achieving their inflation goals. Bloomberg conducted a global survey of economists, revealing some key takeaways. Firstly, the consensus is that central banks will not trigger economic crashes in the pursuit of inflation targets. They acknowledge the potential risk posed by fiscal policies as long as public confidence in the return to the 2% inflation, which is the target, and that 2% inflation target is maintained. Central banks have some room to adjust their strategies as well. Economists govern 16 prominent central banks. They believe that authorities may take longer to reach their inflation goals if it causes less harm to the economies. A major proportion of respondents are even willing to tolerate somewhat stronger or weaker pricing pressure as long as expectations remain stable. The former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney and IMF Deputy Managing Director Geeta Gopinath argue that the era of pre-pandemic low interest rates may not return, as global patterns suggest high inflation levels. Gopinath advises a proactive approach, suggesting policymakers to be ready to respond even before inflation becomes a major concern. However, the situation remains precarious, especially with the crisis in West Asia, which is potentially disrupting oil supplies. Flexibility might be needed in the opposite direction when the next global recession strikes. In Europe, the 8-year experiment with negative interest rates drew mixed reactions, and economists predict that the Federal Reserve's attempts to curb inflation in the US may be partly offset by government actions. The central bankers warn that if the interest rates will rise, the fiscal expenditure will not reduce. The voters, meanwhile, expect their representatives to enact policies that promote long-term prosperity. With the complexities of these economic debates and also the uncertainty of the global landscape, the policymakers face the daunting challenge of striking the right balance to ensure economic stability and growth.